Thank you. I was serving as a whale watch guide on a catamaran off the coast of Maui, Hawaii, and there were more than 100 children on board hoping to see whales. And we had gone out about as far as we could with absolutely not a spout in sight. And the kids were getting hot and restless and tired, and I thought I better do something to keep them engaged. And so I was the one with the microphone, like right now, and so I thought, well, I'll have them repeat after me. And so if you'll humor me and reenact this, whales, whales. Come up to breathe, come up to breach. At that moment, a 90,000-pound mother humpback whale came flying out of the water and slammed down next to us. She proceeded to bring her calf alongside the boat, and the parents and I were looking at each other with tears in our eyes and our jaws on the deck, and a little boy came up to me and said, "Make him do something else." So this is one of the special experiences that I've had by choosing a career path in free choice science learning. Free choice learning is essentially any type of learning outside of a formal education setting. Free choice science learning opportunities present themselves to us every day. It's the magazine article on vaccinations that catches your eye in the checkout line at the grocery store. It's the book that you pick up at the airport on climate change. More and more, as we move away from physical media and turn towards digital media, we engage in free choice science learning as we look at an app to see what phase the moon might be in. We read a blog that talks about the latest sea slug that can photosynthesize. Or we look at our homepage to watch a shuttle launch. This is my 2-year-old building his 21st century swiping skills. Free choice science learning also happens in places like science museums, science centers, aquariums. It's the opportunity to choose which tank you may want to spend more time observing, or which hands-on exhibit you may want to interact with. By show of hands, how many of you have been to one of these types of institutions? A few of you don't have your hands raised. You may have missed the giant dinosaurs out front there. So with millions of dollars being invested into these types of institutions, it begs the question, are they effective at science learning? A recent multi-year study by Oregon State University scientists say that the answer is yes. The study focused on the California Science Center in Los Angeles and reports that science museums can, in fact, significantly enhance and increase people's knowledge and attitudes around science. At this particular science center, more than half of all the residents in Los Angeles have visited since its opening. This is Tess. Tess is a 50-foot body simulator who's at the Science Center and was used as a marker for this particular study. And Tess teaches about homeostasis, amongst other science concepts. And in Los Angeles County, nearly half of all of the people can define a term that the majority of America cannot. And it's due to Tess being an amazing science ambassador. And what's interesting, too, is that science museums, through this study, they showed that we can cut across racial, social, economic barriers in ways that we've spoken about this morning. So like Tess, I have a passion for engaging people in science learning, and I have an artifact to prove it. This is my Trapper Keeper, an 80s reference for some of you, that is spilling out with articles from Great Lakes fish to yellowed letters to the Jacques Cousteau Society. And while my interests have remained the same since I was around 7 or 8 years old, particularly as it relates to aquatic life, my motivation has evolved from wanting to swim with those cute dolphins to really wanting to help people connect with the world around them and excite their imagination in a way that they see themselves as part of a larger whole and really empower them to give back to that whole. I've found time and again that the most powerful way to be able to do this is through stories. And storytelling is the one thread that connects all of these free choice science learning institutes. And while I share a few more brief stories from the science learning field, I want to invite you to daydream. You're going to do it anyway, so I thought I would invite you. I want you to daydream about the role that stories play in your life. Whether it's your cover letter with your resume, or it's the website on your new game launching, or excuse me, on your new game business venture. Or it might be the way that you persuade people to follow you in a project that you're running. Every day of our lives, we're telling stories. One of my favorite storytellers of science, art, and visual perception is the Exploratorium in San Francisco. They have a tinkering studio that is dedicated to invention, investigation, and collaboration. In this space, you may chat with a visiting artist or scientist and create alongside them. You may have a meaningful conversation that builds a shared understanding of the world, or you may just express yourself. This is the Elmwood Science Spot, a 500 square foot studio that came from a concept that was based on the Buffalo Museum of Science's strategic planning process. It was a hub and spoke idea of having satellite science studios that would act as feeders back to the main museum. We tested programs like Toddler Time, After School Science, Da Vinci-based science camps, open studio hours, and even sidewalk astronomy. And it was not necessarily the actual science activities that left the biggest impression on me. It was really about having a creative space, a laboratory, where you could really test out pieces of your story and ultimately allow it to tell itself. So what is your space that you might be able to use to evolve your story? Also through the Buffalo Museum of Science, I had the opportunity to participate in science-based experiences which were then interpreted on the museum floor or through programs. This is the Byron Dig, which is a paleontological dig site that is in upstate New York, and it bears evidence to the last glacial period, what we often refer to as the Ice Age, though we're technically still in the Ice Age. So at this site, the air is filled with the smell of clay earth, as you are filled with anticipation that at any moment something may come out of one of these pits that could completely change how we view the past and history. I remember the first time I saw a Mastodon tooth. The types of specimens found at the site are Mastodon tusks, giant Ice Age beaver tooth, Paleo-Indian arrowheads. And this particular tooth, the Mastodon tooth, when it first came out, it had this pearlized sheen to it because it had been covered by clay for millennia and had not touched air. The power of the museum's paleontologist bringing this object on the museum floor connects people with 10,000 years ago in about 10 seconds. It's interesting to see as more and more digital and virtual technology is coming onto the floor on many science museums and other experience-based sites, there's a phenomenon happening where we're also craving the power of real exchanges, real human connections, and first-person, in-person storytelling like we have today. And we're likely to see more and more of this. What are the objects that might help you tell your story? What are the icons in your story? How might you use those to help others make meaningful connections? I spent some time with this organization called MOM. It's the Hellenic Society for the Study and Protection of the Monk Seals in Greece. The monk seal is the most endangered marine mammal in Europe, and there's thought to be actually less than 250 of them. So the staff of MOM and volunteers work very hard to educate the public about this marine animal. It was not the crystal blue waters of the Mediterranean or the sleek power of this animal that left the biggest impression on me, though those were impressive aspects. It was really the way that the folks with MOM spent time with their target audience, the fishermen, who saw the seal as their enemy or competitor. And they didn't ram their boats or march with posters. They would go to pubs, have conversations with them, eat with their families, and transform their mindset around this animal. And now those fishermen are the seal's greatest protectors. We listen when we feel respected. We listen when we feel understood. How might you reach out to the individuals that you want to engage with your story? What types of knowledge or attitudes or emotions do they have around the content that you're sharing? Invent Now, the organization that operates the National Inventors Hall of Fame, has a children's summer camp program called Camp Invention. Next summer, the program GeoQuest is being released. One of the modules for GeoQuest involves youth from around the globe giving challenges to children in the Camp Invention program, real-world challenges. This is Jackson from Maui, Hawaii, and he says, if a tsunami were to hit my island, I'd want a way to get to high ground fast. What can you invent to help me with this? After receiving digital messages, the children then go to idea stations, and their goal is to keep open and generate as many potential solutions as possible. So these young ladies are working on figuring out a way to design the ultimate vehicle for Jeremiah from Sudan to be able to ride through sandstorms. And Joshua in Singapore is running out of living space, and Luna in Paris is having the challenge that many people are ignoring red lights. Here's a young man working on creating some type of a wind turbine. He is helping Amy in Cuba with hurricane-proof houses. And this team is working on turning trash into power for Amy in Honduras. How will you paint a picture that invites people in? How will you paint that using engaging people's senses and their minds and their imaginations? In 2004 and 2012, we had the opportunity to view the rare events of the Venus transit. And while they happen in pairs, they're actually separated by more than a century. I remember watching this through a solar-safe filter from a museum rooftop, and the sun just pouring into me, and I can still capture that feeling. This event was celebrated through all sorts of ways, from festivals to amateur astronomer viewings on museum rooftops and on mountaintops and lectures. I actually chose to marry on the evening of the first Venus transit. I thought it sounded more fun than going to a lecture. So the next pair of transits are in 2117 and 2125, and I bet Mosey will have tickets on sale for that, so you can watch for this. But this is really, these types of events, what they truly were an opportunity for people to come around and share an experience around an object that is so distant from us and yet is vital to our daily existence. Sometimes there are events and happenings that have a timeliness to them. What are those events for telling your story? What might people not have been ready for a few minutes ago that they are ready to hear now? In the late 1990s, I served as the education manager at Maui Ocean Center, the Hawaiian Aquarium. And at this ocean center, there's an exhibit called the Shallow Reef. And it's teeming with tropical fish and corals. And my friend Pauline Severance, she's a diver and biologist, and she said, this type of coral, the rice coral, Montipora capitata, that's just fun to say, is going to spawn on the third day after the new moon in July between 7:30 and 8 p.m. Would you like to go? And so I thought, who doesn't like to go to a coral spawning? Sure. So we went out on the boat and we dove in with our full scuba gear on, and I turned my flashlight on, and I remembered thinking, this is my trapper keeper come to life. This is the moment that I dreamt of. And the next moment, the ocean filled with these tiny orange-tinted dots that it looked like an underwater snowstorm, but it was filled with the energy of the birth of a coral reef. The next day, when I went back to the aquarium and I stood in front of this tank, I had a very different story to tell. I had a story that was based on exploring my world. So I invite you to think about your passions and your dreams, and the next time you stand in front of you or your organization's version of the Shallow Reef exhibit, tell a story that shows that you are following your passions and your dreams, because your experiences will become the stories that you give back to the world. I look forward to hearing all of your stories. Thank you.
That was fabulous.
Thank you.
Good job.